Now, the second evil that I would like to mention is the evil of poverty. Like a monstrous octopus, it extends its nagging, prehensile tentacles in villages and cities all over our nation. Some 40 million of our brothers and sisters are poverty-stricken. Many of them go to bed hungry at night. I've seen them with my own eyes. I've lived with them in the ghettos of our nation. Some of them are Indians. Some are Mexican Americans. Some are Puerto Rican. Some are Appalachian whites. The largest group in proportion to its size in the population is the American Negro. Negroes and poor people generally find themselves today smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society. Now, something must be done about this. Something must be done about it quickly. When we look at the Negro community, for an instance, we are facing a major depression every day. The unemployment rate among Negroes is set forth by the Labor Department at 8.4%. Unemployment in the nation generally is about 4%. But they don't deal with all of the facts because they are dealing with statistics that can be gathered as a result of people who've been in the labor market and those who still go to the employment office to try to find work. They aren't dealing with the hundreds and thousands of discouraged Negroes, many of whom have lost hope. They've had so many doors closed in their faces. They've come to conclude that life is a long and desolate corridor with no exit sign. They've lost motivation. There may be another 7 or 8% in that category, which means that the unemployment rate among Negroes may well be 16%. Among some young people, among the youth in the Negro community, in some cities it goes up as high as 35 and 40%. If the nation as a whole confronted what the Negro is presently confronting economically, we would be in a major depression more staggering than the depression of the 30s. And it's not only unemployment. Most of the poor people are working every day, but earning so little money, they cannot begin to gain the basic necessities of life. Something must be done about this. Ultimately, a great nation is a compassionate nation. Ultimately, a great person is concerned about the least of these. And I contend that we still have poverty in America today because there are still all too many people who are trying to be conscientious objectors in the war against poverty. There's somewhere else we ought to be conscientious objectors, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, but not in the war against poverty. The problem is, you see, we have the resources in America to end poverty. The question is whether we have the will. And if we are to end poverty, there must be a tremendous reordering of priorities.
Welcome to the Networking with Michelle podcast, the show dedicated on providing you the how-tos of marketing and networking strategies. Here we believe in the Jim Rohn quote, "Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day." Welcome to a special episode of Networking with Michelle, Perspectives of Black Lives. This is a 5-part series addressing various aspects of the African American community. Today we're discussing poverty and what follows. You just heard the Martin Luther King Jr. speech, America's Chief Morale, discussing poverty and unemployment within the African American community, as well as other groups in the nation. Today's special guest is John P. Comer from Baltimore, Maryland, who works with Communities United, a nonprofit organization that addresses low to moderate income individuals and families from education, minimum wage, voting rights, as well as trauma, which I thought was very interesting. I have to admit, this is an area that I lack when it comes to awareness. And he was very insightful And it just, regardless if I'm in Houston, he's in Baltimore, but across the nation, lots of times some of these same problems are there. And then, of course, the same solutions can be applied regardless. But this brother is doing great work in the community. Definitely like the progress that he's making. Very insightful. So I hope you can definitely take some things away from him. And be sure to check out the show notes at michellegourmet.com and catch this brother through social media as well. So without further ado, John P. Comer. All right, John, I want to thank you for coming on to the Networking with Michelle podcast. Can you please introduce yourself to us?
My name is John P. Comer. I am a co-executive director and lead organizer for Maryland Communities United, based out of Baltimore.
Okay. And can you go into detail with the work that you do with your organization?
So our organization is a membership organization based in low-income communities. So we organize around issues that are impacting the residents in low-income communities. Some of those issues being, pushing for community schools, acknowledging trauma that are in our communities that, we have experienced from different directions, and helping to set up support groups for people to begin to speak about their trauma. We've fought for the minimum wage that was raised in Maryland a couple of years ago, and now we're fighting for raising Baltimore's minimum wage to $15 an hour. And we do a lot of organizing in public housing, as well as like drug addiction and harm reduction work.
And how did you get into that work?
It all started from just something that was inside of me. I was attending North Carolina Central University, around 2000, 2001. And I just noticed that there was a very different environment on campus that didn't seem to acknowledge the surrounding communities, which were low income. So, I pretty much started an on-campus group. And then, after I graduated, I started organizing in New York and traveling around the nation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Based off of your experience, I know you're touching on a lot of issues from minimum wage, public housing, trauma, and education.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was to give you $1 million, what do you think where would that money have to go to first to break the cycle?
Really it has to be distributed to many different places at the same time, sad to say. But, it's a very hard question because, trying to figure out how we got to where we are plays into that. And so, education is definitely important, but the changing of curriculum that actually addresses African kids and teaches them about their history to the point to where there's a certain amount of confidence that comes from being Black. That could be a start. But, we also have to acknowledge that many of our people in our communities don't know how to read, need help with learning how to save money, learning how to make money, learning how to start their own businesses. And, I've just been a big fan of entrepreneurship because I think that, sometimes fighting and asking for jobs to come to the community is, we have to remember part of the way we got to where we're at is because jobs left the community.
Right.
And that also lets you know that we were not business owners and CEOs of these jobs that left. So, we have to build our own.
I definitely agree with that. I'm all about the entrepreneurship piece. You mentioned the trauma. What kind of trauma do y'all deal with specifically?
So, as a Black person, we deal with all kinds of trauma, right? Like on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And then many of us in our communities have lost close people to murder, have seen murders, have been a part of violence. Some people have actually, been people who have harmed people. And so all of that is a result of trauma and continues to result in more trauma. So what ended up happening was, one day I was out in McCullough Homes, which is a public housing project in Baltimore. It's the first neighborhood I organized when I got here. And within an hour and a half to 2 hours and a 2 mile radius, I talked to, just randomly, I talked to 5 mothers who had lost sons to murder.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just, I was just so shocked by random conversations, and it all came up at once. And so many times our members, who volunteer with us, who fight in their communities every day, they don't necessarily, some of them haven't necessarily told us up front that they've lost a close person to murder. We kind of find 2 years later. And much of that comes from people feeling that they don't have anywhere to, unload some of their stress, some of their pain. So they've been holding it in so long. They've been trying to be strong for other people, for the rest of their family. And, also, I just like to really say that to Black women that I appreciate you, because most of our groups are made up of Black women, and the thing is, I've been organizing for 12, 13 years now, and it's always been that. And so Black women have been carrying the torch for our community for so long. And in that same breath, I want to give a shout out to the brothers, because we have a few brothers that are on board and hanging on and continuing to fight with us too. So.
Absolutely. We definitely need our brothers. One thing I've realized from my experience, because I used to see a therapist, and I've several times, just I guess since college, throughout life, off and on. And there was always some, I guess, negative curiosity / backlash with that, because it's kind of like, you see a therapist, what's wrong with you? And it's not necessarily something being quote unquote wrong as far as a diagnosis, but I do wish that our community was just a little bit more open when it comes to talking about issues. One, and the second, talking about it's okay to get professional help, whether that's within a community center, church, but not just going to church, but actually talking to someone specifically, and as well as professionally.
Yeah, I think it's important for our people to realize that much of our depression stems from our oppression. And that, we all have been touched by the evil hand of oppression and continue to be touched by the evil hand of oppression daily. And so any people who would be put under this amount of pressure would react the same way. Maybe not as strong as we've reacted, because we're survivors, right? But it's very important for people to know that you're human and it's only so much you can take. And so this fast rush of, or what it seems to be fast rush of mental illness and mental health, it's all a result of us holding things in and not getting help for it.
Absolutely. Now, I understand you're in the Baltimore, Maryland area. A couple of months ago, I came across an article here in Houston that was talking about public housing, because I guess with public housing, we are accustomed to it being in lower income areas. I guess you can even say there's some segregation to it. And right now, or a couple months ago, there's, I guess, somewhat of controversy stating that they're trying to put the public housing in more affluent parts of Houston. That way it can lead to more opportunities. And I just wondering is that something that's possibly been exposed to your area, or just your overall thoughts about that? If public housing was to be moved to middle class, more affluent areas, would more opportunities come for those families, as well as the children too?
Well, part of what I like to say is, amongst Blacks in this city, public housing in Baltimore has already been amongst middle class people, other middle class Blacks. There are some neighborhoods that you can go into in Baltimore and it's 95% housing, and then like 5 to 10% of the residents, there's like a public housing complex within the middle of some of these neighborhoods. So to me, it continues to carry on the definition of the word projects. So it just sounds like they're just herding people around like lab rats, doing tests on people to see. And so I really like to see this model and to see how many people are actually welcoming, putting public housing residents amongst the affluent. I don't have a problem with it. My question would be the percentage of it, of people that are actually, maybe it is an opportunity, maybe it's not, right? But, there are so many other projects that's probably going on in downtown Houston, and they're probably talking about, demolishing a few public housing structures down there. So maybe, that conversation might even be to get the focus off of them displacing people from downtown. Now, I do agree that public housing structures need to be torn down. Like the housing situation, many times it comes with a certain way of thinking. The housing situation many times is, it's deplorable, and it connects to other things like crime and drug use and, depression and things of that nature. So what I'm concerned with is the process afterwards, when they tell people, yes, you'll be able to move back, and then they can't move back, and then they move so far out into the county where there is no public transportation to where they can't even get around. And so that's another question to pose to this project of moving people to affluent communities, because affluent communities don't catch public transportation.
Right, that's a good point.
Let's see how well that'll work. And, maybe what should happen is they partner with some of the other resources that are offered usually in most cities, to where you're not just moving people out there, you're helping them get jobs, you're training them to be ready to, take a job out there, and try to set them up with an employer so they can actually, look to improve their lives in different
have
ways.
More of a holistic approach and not just a one-off solution or idea.
Not the usual,
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Okay, just a few more questions. When it comes to the minimum wage aspect, I know some states have implemented it, and I know it's taken a long time. What are some of the benefits of minimum wage?
Many times, latchkey kids come from parents or a parent who's working 1, 2, or 3 jobs. And so it's not that they're a bad parent, it's that they're trying to take care of home, and they're not home enough to take care of the kid, which the kid many times is left alone, left to grow up on his or her own. And, sometimes the streets actually call, and, the kid can become victim to the streets. But minimum wage can cut down on the amount, raising the minimum wage can cut down on the amount of jobs people have to work. It could also possibly connect to cutting down on the amount of robberies and violent crimes that happen, because many times crimes that are taking place are happening out of survival. And it's all for the mighty dollar that we put in front of people. But the truth is, many of the cities and probably most of the nation is not keeping up with the index where the minimum wage should be at anyway. So the fact that we're talking $15 minimum wages across the nation and, here in Baltimore shouldn't be a surprise. And it's a fair wage, and so what gets me many times is the same people that speak out and speak so vehemently against the minimum wage are some of the same people that you read their insults at the bottom of articles online. And so, they say, people say, where's this guy's father? Where's this guy's mother? But when it comes to actually helping improve the situation of some of these people, they still want to seemingly hold them back. So I just probably went off on a tangent, but, it's just something that I noticed,
It's okay. If we increase the minimum wage 2016, 2017, in your opinion, do you think this is something that, well, one, what is the next step? And then 2, how often does the minimum wage need to be increased? Is this something that I guess on a national level should be looked at every 5 years?
Well, the minimum wage should attempt to keep up with the living wage and the economy. So every time the economy inflates, the minimum wage should, inflate to meet that as well. Also, anytime you raise the minimum wage, it has to be phased in. So it's not like 2016, whatever your minimum wage is, wherever you are, and then boom, $15, 2017. It doesn't happen that way. It actually gives business owners the opportunity to plan and to phase that in, because we don't want to lose a lot of businesses because you'll lose a lot of jobs. So, but the minimum wage is fair. It needs to be fair. $15 an hour. In many places, $15 an hour is arguably still not enough. Maybe like DC and San Francisco, and even like, places that are close to it, like Oakland and Baltimore being close to DC. So, the level of poverty across this country is shameful. And much of it is because of low wages.
Just thinking about some of my experiences. Yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah. It's all connected. All of this work we do, the community schools, the minimum wage, the support groups in public housing, to the fighting for better housing conditions, all of this stuff contributes to one thing or the other, like the school to prison pipeline, mass incarceration. It's all a well-built machine that's funneling us through and has been funneling us through for decades and centuries. And so it's hard to try to break that cycle because, the system is like a god. If you hear people speak about their God, the system is like a God. You can't see it, but you can feel it, right? And like what we feel is that oppression and that pain. And, we have to find a way to get it out, or otherwise it's going to come out in violent ways. Yeah. It's going to come out in violent ways against ourselves, against other people. So, we have to focus on keeping our community healthy, spiritually, mentally, physically.
Absolutely. I attended a conversation rally a couple of days ago, and one of the attorneys that I know, he spoke and he mentioned the 13th Amendment, and he was like, do you know what that says? And we were like, that's when the slaves were free. And he quoted it. Of course, he's an attorney, so he knows it. But to paraphrase it, it's like, yes, the free slaves, and then it's like semicolon, but it's obliged to indentured servants, which is now the prison system. So technically, if you're in prison, you're a slave, and you can work on, whatever these bigger picture projects are. And when he said that, it was just so eye-opening to me. And it's going back to what you said. It's like, it makes sense when you break down to school to prison pipeline and how prison's just a big business, too big of a business. And then, it's pretty much free to low labor for a lot of these corporations.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we are the pawns, and, it's just a sad situation that people aren't waking up fast enough to see it. Like, there's a consciousness that's spreading through this country right now that I can appreciate, but it didn't come without a lot of loss and a lot of pain, such as these police shootings that are going on. But I must say that we also are working on behalf and we have many members who are formerly incarcerated, ex-felons, ex-cons, whatever, title they carry. But in Maryland, we passed a law recently that allows all ex-felons to vote. And, we were on the front line of that fight. And then soon after that, we had a mayoral candidate forum specifically for ex-felons who can now vote. So, we're organizing on that end as well, trying to galvanize people to help them realize that power comes in a block.
Do you think the ex-felons that are allowed to vote, do you think they take their voting rights and politics a little bit more seriously now?
So that was the next step as to why I decided we should do an ex-felon mayoral candidate forum, because now that a law has passed allowing ex-felons to vote, some will take advantage of it. But you got to remember, the system is meant to stabilize you. It's not meant to mobilize you, right? And so when the law came out, there wasn't a bunch of letters that went out to everyone saying that now all ex-felons can vote. There wasn't press conferences done by the Board of Elections trying to ensure everyone can vote. So you have to provide reasons for people to vote, because, the same system that has locked people up and treated people like animals is related to the same system that people are voting within now. And so sometimes, you can look at it and connect the dots, and it's not something that's very encouraging sometimes. So being able to have the mayoral candidates to come and speak to that population saying, hey, this is what we plan on doing for you guys. I just think the brothers and sisters that came together for that, it was a step. It was a huge step in the right direction. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, John, I definitely want to just commend you on your service to your community. I like what you're doing. I think everything that you're doing is important and is just equally important, from education, public housing, minimum wage, and definitely the voting. That's something that I try to get involved here in Houston. I've been able to serve on the Houston Area Urban League Young Professionals. So we're very involved when it comes to civic engagement. And got me thinking like some things I need to bring to the table to these organizations.
Well,
that's what it's about.
We got to be in the trenches. Yeah. And, I hear a lot of talk going on lately about, does marching matter? We need to stop marching. And let me just try to address that very quickly.
Yeah.
Just like voting is not the end all. It's not necessarily going to change everything, but it's a tool that can be used towards changing. So just like marching is not necessarily going to change everything, but marching may do more for the people that are marching to unify than it does for the people that don't want you to unify. So just think about when you're marching and people see you on the side, there's a feeling that comes from that amount of unity, and new people join in and they want to be a part of it. And sometimes that propels people to continue to give back to their community for the rest of their lives. It also helps with the media. Many times, public officials, elected officials are watching how many numbers are out there. So no, it's not going to change something necessarily tomorrow, but it's a tool towards change. And this is organizing. And, people have to understand we didn't get here to this point in a few days, and we're not necessarily going to turn it around within a few days. So, I think there are many ways to get there as long as we have the same goal, but we have to be careful about how we discourage people from getting involved in our community.
No, you're absolutely right, because I've been in a few conversations with friends, and I'm going to have to use your valid points when it comes to, why we need to march, why we need to protest. I told her it's not for everybody, but, some people protest, some people strategize, some people have money or education, if they're an attorney, that can bail the protesters out. Like, we all need each other one way or another.
And that's the thing, there's many ways and there's many angles that the system has attacked us. And there's many ways and many angles that we have to organize. So, if people are marching, I don't discourage people from marching, even if I think, the march isn't necessary. I mean, now a lot of what's happening is people are shutting down highways. And, it's all a tool to get the attention of the media, to spread the message, to get the conversation started, to keep the conversation going. It's very important. So I just ask people to get in, somewhere where they fit in and, just be careful of how we discourage each other when we all have some kind of similar idea of what freedom may look like for us.
And how do you define success?
Success is an individual thing. Success is a feeling, but when I organize, success is transformational change. Success is changing the policy, but not just changing the policy. Changing the policy and having the mobilization behind it, where the policy is actually implemented and you can feel it and you can see the difference in the community. So, a lot of it is numbers. So mobilization, you want to see a certain amount of numbers. And then after the mobilization, you want to have a certain amount of contacts to continue to move forward to actually have, specific jobs for people to do in the communities to continue to mobilize. So at the end of the day, like, organizing is a very deep thing. And it's not just marching. It's not just, voting. It's a year-round, everyday thing, being in the community. It's these support groups, addressing the trauma. It's a well-rounded, holistic approach to recognizing our pain and attempting to affect these issues without burning ourselves out, without having too much on our plate, but also collaborating with other groups, like being a part of a coalition, because what's taking place is it's too much politics in nonprofits now
Right.
to where people are not working together. And like our issues are like just too deep, too broad for us to be on the surface not liking each other. I'm sure our ancestors are just turning over in their graves because of, this fickleness that we have. And the issues are all bigger than all of us. So, until we actually can get past some of our own faults and downfalls, we're going to have a tough time. But man, like, the feeling of unity is here. I hope it lasts forever. I hope it's just not a fad. I hope it's just not, the time where in the 90s, everybody was wearing the Malcolm X hats and the Africa medallions and stuff like that. I hope that like much of this stuff is embedded in the hearts of our people, the souls of our people, the minds of our people, to where we can continue to understand where our focus needs to be. And, just put all of the mess to the side. Just put all the small things, the small-minded thoughts to the side, because regardless of how you feel, we're all in the same boat. We're all receiving the same treatment.
Absolutely.
We're all feeling some similar pain, and we all have to rise together.
Yeah, if people want to follow you or find more information, where can they do that at?
So I'm on Instagram, and it's Architect of Justice on Instagram, Architect of Justice. And I'm on Facebook, which I update fairly often as well. And that's John, John, P as in Paul, Comer, Comer, John P. Comer on Facebook. And I really don't tweet, so just got to catch me on one or two of those things. And sometimes I'm on Snapchat acting up, We gotta have fun, man. You still gotta be yourself. Still gotta be yourself in this movement.
It has to be a balance.
Yeah, expression is important.
Yeah, well, John, I definitely want to thank you for your time. Thank you, and we'll have that information on the show notes. And for everyone, remember, a personal connection leads to an influential network. Thanks for networking with Michelle.